Hi, and welcome to another episode of Kasper On BI. Today, I'm pretty excited to talk to Anton Fritz. And Anton is a PM on the Power BI team who takes care of data protection. Now, today we're going to talk about what is data protection? What does it mean? Is it row level security, object level security? But no, in this case, it's something completely else. It's how can you protect your data that is sitting inside of Power BI? How can you make sure that data is not leaking outside of the organization? So we'll talk about all of that with Anton. And with that, let's go to the episode. Hi, Anton. It's great to have you here on the Kasper On BI show. I'm honored to have you here. Maybe a lot of people don't know exactly what you do at the Power BI team. So maybe you can share a bit who you are, what you do at the Power BI team.
Sure, and thank you, Kasper, for having me. It's a great honor for me. I'm a fan outside of podcast and now in the podcast as well. So I'm a principal PM manager on Power BI team. So I joined Microsoft 11 years ago and switched to Power BI 3 years ago. And mostly after shipping data flows GA, so I just came to Power BI team. We shipped the data flows GA. And then we had sort of like org shuffle. It happens, like different teams sort of like looking on new opportunities to make an impact. And one of the things that we identified sort of like our team started to look on enterprise problems for Power BI customers. And one of the things that we sort of like discovered, and I remember you were one of our people that helped us get to this insight, is that, hey, we need to have better data protection, information protection, better tooling for enterprises, because enterprise business customers really love Power BI. They want to get all their business data to Power BI, but not always the security or compliance admins are sort of like okay with getting everything for Power BI. So we identified this gap, and what we are doing in the last 3 years, we're sort of like mitigating this gap by leveraging Microsoft security products. So Microsoft is a huge vendor for security with over 10 billion in revenues last year and growing fast. So we have really great security stack in Microsoft that helps Office customers, Teams, Windows to be secure. And we are leveraging this tech to make Power BI more sort of like compliant, secure. So this is what I'm doing. Recently, I became a people manager because we are growing and investing more in this area. So I have 2 PMs that joined me to work on this area. And basically what we are doing, we are sort of like, there are 2 features, MIP sensitivity labels, which enable you to tag data in Power BI and and because it's sort of like Microsoft feature, so it's enables us to provide the protection from source, where it's Azure or Excel file, to Power BI, and when you export data to Office again. Mm-hmm. And there is a new feature that we're really excited about. It was recently released at public preview, which is data loss prevention policies, which is also more of automatic detection versus like manual tagging, more of automatic detection, content scan, etc.
Yeah, we'll definitely get back to those. So yeah. What was your life? Because you like to ask that question. What was your life before Microsoft, before getting into data? Or were you always into data?
So I'm from Israel, and I'm also based in Israel. And in Israel, we have sort of like a mandatory army service. And so I went to school. I have a degree in computer science and mathematics. And I joined as professional to Israeli Defense Force. And basically what I did in my first 3 years there is actually doing research and analytics over like statistical models, predicting stuff, analyzing stuff. And I came in love with data. So I was always sort of like a bit analytical as a person, tried to figure out stuff. And like I had 3 years where I just like did data analytics, big data analytics to support strategic decision-making, sort of like McKinsey, but for the army. And I came in love with the ability to get insight, like when you look on the stuff and like analyze data and get a good decision. So it started there. I was like 21 when I did it. And later I moved to a cybersecurity intelligence unit where I was sort of like met I was software engineer there, and then a team lead for engineers and QA and product managers. And there I sort of like got to see how we build products, also data products for like decision making, be different, intelligence. And there sort of like I discovered like the product aspect of the data, because we were like the team was building features all the time. And then I did a query. So I was one of the only people who like doing queries. Hey, let's see how many people use it. None. So I was okay, we are doing something wrong. So both of these sort of like connected. And when I joined Microsoft, I sort of like joined as a product and was always around data. So yeah.
All right, that makes sense.
Yeah. So actually, all of my I think like data was part of like it's like, especially for product managers, I think there are stuff that are well defined, and but a lot of like it's freestyle. And I bring my data analytics skills to everywhere I go. So I really care about usage. So I analyze usage using Power BI as well. I analyze opportunities. So always based on data. Yeah.
Makes sense. A lot of us have obsessed about data, so we're definitely in the right place, the right area. Okay, so let's talk about data protection. I know you are passionate about it. I mean, I like talking about it too at conferences. Mostly, the way I see it, when we talk about data protection at the BI conference, they're asking, "Oh, okay, row level security, things like this." So, when I talk to you and when I ask you about data protection, what does it mean to you? How do you explain it?
Yeah. So actually explain it as a usage enabler. So basically, and this is like coming back to the point that I mentioned a bit before. So when we talk, so I really love Power BI, and I really love like sort of like the self-service penetration of Power BI into organization. So this is like enables the professional to choose the tools that works best for them. They choose Power BI in a lot of cases. And sort of like it was sort of like not weird, but bothered me that hey, we cannot get to full rollout because of stuff that not related to the quality of the product or to the functionality, but just because it does not meet some what I perceive as basic requirements. And as being part of Microsoft, and especially after Satya became CEO, sort of like the one Microsoft spirit, and especially here in Israel, so we have a relatively big R&D side, but it's still small. It's like a few thousand people here, and we all know each other. So it sort of like was, hey, so we have customers that have problem with security, and here we have on like another floor teams that does the security for Office. Why this cannot meet? And so this is how I sort of like see data protection as sort of like a solution to a problem. So Microsoft have tools. We have great products that people need our help to deploy, and data protection is a way to help them.
So, what are you protecting? So, like for example, when we have Power BI, we talk about row level security, object level security. We talk about data sovereignty. There's lots of different things that you can protect. I like to talk about it that way. Row level security, you protect certain rows of data for people to see. Object level security for people to see objects. When we talk about like data protection in your world, what are you protecting?
So we're protecting the organization, really. So and let me explain this perspective. So like we are mostly familiar with our Power BI personas, but in every large organization, it mainly sort of like problem with big organizations. They have another departments, which is a chief information security officer, compliance officer, different organization, different names. And these people, they're not familiar with Power BI, and the responsibility, hey, how do I ensure that sensitive customer data that would not leak, both to protect my company customers and also protect my reputation, also to comply with agreements that I have with my partners. So if you're a healthcare, in healthcare industry, you're responsible to protecting your patient data. You're responsible for it to be like if it's in Europe, that it will be stored in Europe. it cannot live. So this is like the organizations, they need to protect their data. And the organization want to be productive. They want to use Power BI. So what we are trying to see how we help this organization to protect the data in Power BI. And when I say organization, this is why the solutions that we are building are sort of like more like coming from centralized policies. So for people who are not familiar with Microsoft Information Protection Sensitivity Labels, it's a solution for Office to classify and label files. So you can say, hey, this is highly confidential, internal only, etc. And even the tagging of the data helps organization to provide legal protection. Because like Kasper, you and I are talking, we can share a report. If I see this report is highly confidential and I tweet about it, I probably won't, because we are both in Microsoft and we have our training. Hey, you don't tweet about highly confidential data, you don't take a screenshot of it. This is already helps organization to be compliant and protective and sort of like support this culture of compliance, information protection, respecting privacy, and using the best tools in data. So just to summarize how I see it, so organizations want to protect the data wherever it is. Power BI becoming a big part of IT solutions. A lot of companies standardize on Power BI as sole solution. And we need to provide organizations the tools to enforce their sort of like security and compliance culture and the regulations and rules in Power BI in a seamless way. This is what we do and how we do. So I will take a few more seconds. So basically, the fact that we enabling to classify data, so responsible users can sort of like tag and say, hey, this is highly confidential. This is confidential. All of this information becomes visible to security admins in M365 compliance. It's audited, their activity explorer, so they can get the visibility, hey, who is accessing sensitive data, where it is, how it works. And this is sort of like versus before sensitivity labels, where like all data in Power BI is the same. Like there is no difference between report A, B, C, or D. There are just reports. I don't know what is the sensitivity of the data. So this is one thing. So people can know when they consume sensitive data and organizations can monitor it. And also because this is same solution that Office use, if organization defines a policy to protect files by encryption, if certain label is set, you can say, hey, highly confidential internal only, and only your FTEs will be able to access the file. So when that is exported outside of Power BI, the file becomes protected instead of like just files that you can send in email to everybody, even by mistake, the file is now protected and only authorized user can access it.
That makes a ton of sense. Okay, so let's take it one step back because we talked about a lot of things in a very short amount of time. So let's start with the labeling, because a lot of the Power BI users that we talk to, one, don't know about it. Two, it's not this is the great part and also the not so great part, because it's a feature that is not owned and built by the Power BI team, because it's owned and built usually by because it's part of Office, right? Yeah. And oftentimes the Office team, it's a completely different team that sets up the security for Office, and they don't even know what to do with that. You can even do it with Power BI, and vice versa. The Power BI team doesn't know they can leverage the things that they already have available in their organization also for Power BI. So how does this work? How is it shared? And where do you go and to set it up and manage it? And
so this is a good point. So we're still sort of like trying to work it out by increasing visibility. So this is one of the challenges that how like we are as product team, we invest a lot of time to educate security admins, like the folks that you call, like on Office, to know that they have this functionality for Power BI. Actually, yesterday I met the CTO of a big implementation company in Israel. He has like 170 engineers working on Power BI, and he haven't heard about MIP sensitivity levels in Power BI. So we do have a problem here. We're trying to address it. But in a lot of cases, the way it's discovered, it's sort of like Power BI admin gets a requirement for from security admins. Hey, we need to have a classification applied on your data in Power BI. we need to ensure that when you export data, it is protected. So this is like, because Power BI admins usually they are not accountable for the organization security. They're accountable only for Power BI security, and the requirements coming usually from the central security team.
Yes.
And when they have this
they come to
requirement,
my team too a lot, as you know, with these questions.
yeah, actually, like you're the greatest advocate. So a lot of customers came to on board to me using like via engagements with you and your colleagues.
Yeah.
Because big enterprise, when they have a question, they don't Google or Bing for documentation. They go to an expert. So what we are trying to do, we are investing in increasing awareness with MVP community, with security community, etc. But what happens usually when they come, like whether it's via CAD team or some other team, to us, they say, okay, how we can do this and this in Power BI. And then we just guide them, point them to available documentation demos, and they do it pretty seamlessly. I won't enclose the customer name, but we have like really big customers that actually did full deployment of MIP labels without interacting with us, like us. Maybe they interacted with you, but without interacting with us for a moment. Basically, they follow the documentation. So how it works? Your security admin will come to you as Power BI admin and say, hey, do you classify your data in Power BI? And your answer will be no. Okay, you need to do it by end of the fiscal year. And if you don't do it, we'll need to start shutting down your usage of Power BI.
I have never personally heard anyone ask, do you classify your data? It's all about how do we protect the data against exfiltration? That's the main question I hear. Is that also what you're hearing?
Less. People maybe like because, but maybe it's by definition because people that get to me, they get like after one of two rounds. So it's not that like people approaching to me directly via LinkedIn. Hey, Anton, how do we enable this? It's not there yet. So I usually get using like the Microsoft engagement programs. This is how customers get to me via MVPs, architects, etc. Which are working with customer about Power BI deployment and identify this specific part as a gap, and there's a sort of like fish around and find us.
Yeah.
And I think like when they talk about data exfiltration, it's such a big thing. Like it can be exfiltrated in so many ways. So the approach is usually like, how do you reduce risk? So using net sensitivity label, it does not prevent 100% data leakage or by mistake sharing data with unauthorized users. But it's reduce the risk significantly. And it also like auditable. So like one of the things that organization, look, I need the audit trail. So I need to know if somebody doing something bad. So we have the audits. And all of our audits, and this is something that most of customers don't know, are going and can be consumed and analyzed by Microsoft centralized security softwares like Sentinel, etc. So organization can identify bad actor and see if they're doing something bad in Power BI. So this is like from there it's coming from.
Next level. Okay, so
I'm sure I answered your question completely, but so guide me.
I think you did. But let's go back to the other question before I interrupted you about about this. So you're a company, you want to set it up. Where do you go to set it up?
So you're going to Microsoft 365 compliance. So it's compliance.microsoft.com, and there you. This is a portal where you explore your audit logs, and you can define configure various Microsoft security solutions. Information protection is one of those solutions. So in this portal, you go to information protection. Usually you will use, you already have sensitivity labels there because most of our, like you cannot enable them only for Power BI. When you enable them for Office and Power BI. So if you're already an Office shop.
Yeah. It does work the other way around, right? Because I've seen customers who have it in Office, but not in Power BI.
Yeah, so when you deploy it in Office, so there are the steps. So if your organization haven't defined a label scheme, it will take you a long time. But if your organization already defined label scheme and it's used in Office, Then to enable it in Power BI, you actually don't even need to go to M365. Power BI admin can enable it in Power BI admin portal. They have information protection switch there, and you can gradually roll it out and test in your even production tenant. You can just enable it for a few users and do your test validation. So usually customers have sort of like a test metrics of stuff that they want to validate how it works, like who can set what label, how it will work on export to Office files, inheritance from source. Okay, when I get data from Excel file with label, how it's applied on Power BI file and on Power BI reports in the service. So these are the steps. So if you gradual rollout, and then you enable it for entire organization. Like important thing to note, so when you want sensitivity levels, you want it to be applicable on all. So you don't want it, usually you don't want it to be optional. So we recently GA'd 2 capabilities that sort of, and for this you need the Office admin or the global admin to enable them in M365 compliance. The 2 things are mandatory and default label policies. Like, because if I'm not reminded to apply sensitivity levels when I create something, I won't do it. So like, because we're busy, we have a lot of signal syntax, so it's really hard to remember. So organization, to ensure that the content is classified and labeled, can sort of like make it part of the label policy. So like for Kasper, every time Kasper creates a report, the organization can decide on default label or mandatory label. Default label can say, hey, everything Kasper creates in Power BI is confidential, Microsoft FT only. Or organization can say, hey, I will let Kasper to decide what is the sensitivity level, but I will not allow Kasper to save something without applying sensitivity level before that. This is pretty much it.
That makes sense. So okay, so you go to this compliance center. So what if you just have Power BI and Office? Like, you can who goes there? Is it the Office admin, or can you also go there? So which team usually owns it?
So historically, M365 compliance was O365 Compliance and Security Center. And it was sort of like evolved to being Microsoft one. But still, like historically, the team that owns Office Security will own this. So it's the same people that you will go to get access to audit logs. These are the same people that can enable sensitivity levels in your organization and edit the label policies.
Yeah, but in general, go ahead.
Yeah, it actually makes sense, because like for organization, a label policy, it's sort of like, it has a meaning. So it has meaning. So the organization usually defined which label should be applied. It's not random. So even when organization decide on enabling sensitivity levels in Power BI after they already have them in Office, they do have some process evaluate about what are the guidelines to creators. Do they want the default label policy or mandatory label policy, and etc. And this process takes time, and you want the Office folks to be involved because it should play the same across the organization. Maybe it's like different teams in IT, but like end user in organization, they will have a Power BI opened and the Office opened one next to each other. So it needs to play and be synced. And this is actually one of the values that we provide, but you need to talk inside your organization to enable it.
Yeah, which sometimes hard, but okay. So and now let's talk about the other elephant in the room, licensing.
Yeah.
So what do I need?
It's not an elephant. Why it's elephant?
I know.
Okay, so
it's not elephant, but it's not part of Power BI.
Yeah. So for sensitivity labeling, so you need license for sensitivity label product, which makes sense. But the license that is required is usually a license that you have if you have Azure Active Directory license or some basic Microsoft SKUs. This license is included, so it's not an elevated license. So most of we like based on what we see, we don't have customers that are blocked because they don't have the proper license, like enterprise customers. If you're a small, medium company, like with few dozen Power BI users or few dozen employees, this might not be available for you. But in this case, it's not always required, because if you have a small team or small company, usually you don't need sensitivity labeling.
All right. So cool. Okay. So let's recap. So because we talked about labeling, mostly the management information protection labeling. So when I do labeling, so I'm a user inside an organization. You can define as an admin team. Okay, you need to label the onus is on you, user. You need to label it, and of course you're the only one who can tell us how secure this content is. So now okay. So let's say I make something highly secure, no one else, only FTEs internally at the company, and I uploaded it to Power BI. What are the things that now can be configured, or what are the things that happen now? Because how do we make it secure? What are the things that we add on top of it now that it is labeled highly secure?
Good question, and I think this is one of the places where we have an elephant in the room. That, like from my perspective at least, so the way sensitivity labels work, it has like two things. It has the label part, like hey, I can tag it, and the tag will be part of the artifacts. And as the data moves from Power BI desktop to Power BI service to Office, this tag remains. And this is works, and this is actually applicable for like over 90% of the files and organizations that are using only just labels, so without any protection settings. For more like secure, sensitive organization, they use protection settings in sensitivity labels. It's not all organization, but sort of like they will say, hey, when I apply highly confidential label on, let's say, Excel file, I will expect only the security group to have access to this data. Like if maybe I don't allow vendors to access this data, maybe I don't allow people that don't have specific clearance to access this data. And this feature is available for files. So when you apply this on Office files, it will enforce the protection. Like applying a label equals restricting access. Same works also when you put the label on PBX file. So we have this for files. In Power BI Service itself, we don't support it yet. We really want to do it. I don't want to overpromise or overcommit, but this is like top of mind for us, and I really hope we will have news within 6-12 months about this. But this is something that we want to say, that the restrict access will flow from PBX file to a Power BI service and to Office. Today in Power BI service, the label is just a label. So if label has protection settings for files, we don't do anything for it. It's a label. But when the data is exported, the data is protected. And basically how we rationalize this, like in Power BI, the data owner can actually, like you cannot upload something to Power BI and somebody will have access to it just by case. So person need to have access to your workspace, or you need proactively to share it with them. So if we try trust our data creators, and most organizations very trust their data creators, they're certified people, they know what they do with their data. So we trust you to share it only with authorized people. So like you have protection on the data. The problem is when it's exported to files, there no system to protect, and then here the labels come to the rescue and apply protection on the file. So only authorized people can access to files. And this is a missing piece in our puzzle that we really look in how we can fill. So the protection also would be consistent, restriction will be consistent as it data also uploaded to Power BI service.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, kind of to your defense, it's a never-ending story, right? You can have so many options and buttons and tweaks and things like this to protect. Of course, more is always better, especially when you talk to security teams. The more options that they have to secure things down, it's always better. But so you said it's traveling. So now I uploaded the Power BI service. So now I download file from I go to my visual and I download the file. It has the same labels on it, right?
Yes.
So that's, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so label and protection. So if like the office admin, the governance admin defined protection settings saying, hey, if this label applied on file, what should be the protection, we apply it on the file automatically. So like, and this is like one of the things that I most love about this feature. You mentioned before what IS creator should do. So you as creator just need to make a decision about the sensitivity of the data. Power BI and Microsoft take care of the rest. If necessary, we'll encrypt the file according to the governance policy. We will persist the label as data travels across Power BI and Office. And if necessary, we'll also protect the Office file. So this is like the added values that we provide to end users. So for end users, just very little interaction.
Okay, so now I've added the label. Now it's a security team. What are the things that are possible for me to see, as like auditing or things like this?
So a security team for labels, let's start with the basic. In Power BI, admin portal, we have protection metrics reports. You can have a status of like classification of your tenant and see how many of the objects are classified, applied with sensitivity label, which are not, and which was sensitivity levels. This is one thing. The second thing, you can track in audit logs the activities to apply sensitivity labels to see who does it, how does it, if somebody changes the label. And this is very important for auditing purposes. So if somebody, let's say, exfiltrates sensitive data outside of the organization can check, hey, I can see on the audit that this data had highly confidential data. And I see it was applied like 3 months before the exfiltration. So we as an organization, we did our best. The fact that it was exfiltrated, maybe it's a bad actor or something like this. So you get all this audit trail about saying, hey, was it sensitive, who applied it when, etc. When that is exported to Power BI, you can see the audit with the sensitivity level, so you can see if somebody is exporting sensitive data. We also, in M365, we have integration with Activity Explorer, so you can see or analyze all these activities. Like for security people, they have a lot of visibility for sensitive data in Power BI. And the last thing, one of the Microsoft security products called Defender for Cloud Apps, previously called Cloud App Security, MCAS, they have a really great integration with Power BI. And there you can actually get automatic alert if somebody does oversharing of sensitive content or overexporting of sensitive content, or even you can prevent block of stuff that are applied with specific sensitivity label to unprotected devices. So once you classify the data, your security admins you at that moment you have a lot of tools that enable you to monitor and govern the sensitive data in Power BI.
That makes sense, and we'll come back to Cloud Defender in a sec. But you talked about something else in the beginning too, about those policies. And one of the reasons I want to talk to you now is also because then I can learn about these policies too a bit more. But so the way I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, the labeling means the onus is on the user, but with the policies, there's also some automatic stuff happening in the back.
Yeah.
How does it work? Where do I go do it? And what can I use it for?
So in Office, this is, I will start with I call it the holy grail of sensitivity labels, which we haven't got to it yet, but it's also something that we are making progress towards. So the ideal solution, you have automatic labeling. So you scan the content, identify sensitive data, and apply the label automatically. We currently don't have this in Power BI, but I think we have something that's even better, which is like label inheritance. I mentioned this a bit so far, but I want to emphasize it. So one of the biggest problems for organization when they use Power BI is sort of like, okay, I have like my sensitive data in some SQL or Excel file, so I know it's sensitive, it's protected, etc. When it goes to Power BI, how do I ensure the same protection and sensitivity levels are persistent? And this is, and we have a label inheritance, which is automatic label inheritance when you fetch data from data sources. It's applicable on Power BI. And we have also automatic inheritance upon creation. So if you have a data set with specific sensitivity label and you now create a new report based on it, we will apply it to the same sensitivity level automatically. And we have also downstream inheritance. So if I apply a label on a data set, and it will be automatically trickled down to all reports and dashboards that connect to these data sets. So all of this is sort of like semi-automatic inheritance features are available in Power BI and can be enabled. Some of them come out of the box. You don't need to enable anything, just use sensitivity labels. Others you can manage in a Power BI admin portal. So you just can like inheritance from data source. You can just enable it or disable it.
Mm-hmm.
Does it answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And then so you mentioned about the Holy Grail, and that's something that's in the works potentially.
Yeah. So this is like and this is like the DLP policies stuff that we didn't start talking about yet, but I will just get it sort of like as I'll share with you why I'm saying that we're working on it. So I'm saying this because we're really working on it. So one of the problems we had in Power BI so far, we did not have a mechanism implemented that actually scans data, like to identify sensitive information. So how does the auto labeling rules work? You usually define, okay, if you find their credit card numbers or social security numbers, then apply label XYZ or provide a user policy tip to apply label XYZ.
Yeah.
The piece that was so we have the labeling piece here, integration with M365, but we didn't have the content scanning piece. And for DLP policies, we actually built the content scanning piece. It's going to be available in production in the upcoming weeks. So, and now that we have this piece that enables to scan content, and we have integration with M365, and we have the labeling, the delta to enable auto labeling scenario is much more feasible than was a couple of years ago when we just started.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think a lot of people are going to be very excited about that.
I hope so. And please reach out to us if you have any questions. Actually, like the ideal solution, I think I read it from Zappos. So Zappos was a company acquired by Amazon, and their CEO wrote a great book about deliver joy. And like the ideal solution, so they had really great customer support, but they actually wanted people just to be able to figure out stuff themselves. And this is like to be very easy for customers. So we have really great customer support. If you don't understand something, open a ticket, we will reply. Contact via LinkedIn, we will reply. Yeah, the ideal solution is that we have it sort of like the tools which are self-exploratory, and people who cannot, like, don't get to it or missing something can reach out to us.
We talked a little bit about Cloud Defender. Now I want to know more about it. What is it? What does it give us? Yeah, and is it also part of the same thing, or is it something else?
So it's yes to all of your questions. So it is something similar. Let me give you a short recap, maybe very short one, about how we came to have a Cloud Defender for Cloud Apps. So basically, Defender for Cloud Apps is a startup that Microsoft bought, which was called Adalom, and they sort of like came into the position that they, okay, now modern organizations, so the information worker is not working only with IT managed software. They have a lot of software that isn't managed by IT, whether it's private or job related. So for example, I can use Gmail, my private Gmail. I can from my workstation. I have Facebook, I have Box, I have Power BI. So I have a lot of services that not necessarily managed by IT team. So this is the first problem that it's called CASB problem. So the first problem they wanted to tackle, hey, how do I provide visibility for the IT about what is happening in their organization? And so when you use Cloud Defender for Cloud Apps, first things it allows you, it sort of like scans and give you a visibility over all of the services all the people in the organization use, and they can also provide you a score which of the services are sort of like risky, which are not. Like, and this is like the first value. So, and then the second value, and this is like the name Defender. It's also they became part of the Defender family. So it's not they haven't started as Microsoft 365 compliance for Office for many years. They're sort of like new to the family, relatively new. And they extended this, okay, so once I give you visibility, I also integrate with cloud apps and provide you their audit logs, activities, collect you, and also process it in a way that is relevant for security admins, because there is like a lot of events. So they're doing some processing to make it sure that it's digestible. And so once you have visibility and you have all the events to explore, now they sort of like on top of it build alerting solution and policy solutions. Alerting is based on the activities that people do. And policies can be something that, okay, they have like two features. One based on activity logs and the other by real-time monitoring. So they call it session controls. If you enable session controls, it can work for Power BI and many other applications in Office, like Box, a lot. They did a great job there. So when you enable it via AAD, Azure Active Directory. So you need to enable it there and in Cloud App Security. Basically, what it does, if certain condition is met, user session is coming through Cloud Defender for Cloud Apps dedicated VMs. So they route the traffic between the user and the application. It's not direct, it goes through their server, which enables them to do real-time monitoring for a bunch of applications and sort of like do like, hey, if I'm like connected to Power BI from unmanaged device, and it can be compromised device, like somebody installed something on it, all my data is going to, I don't know, some intelligence agency or some competitor. So they can say, okay, I don't want business files to be downloaded to this machine. So they enable me to connect to Power BI or to any other service, but when I will attempt to download sensitive data to this unprotected device, they have ability to block it because all the traffic comes through their servers. So in the nutshell, what they provide: visibility, ability to investigate in audit logs, ability to provide alerts, and policies that can be enforced when you route the traffic through their servers.
But it's mostly automated, right? They have some built-in mechanisms that detect all these attack patterns or something.
So yes, and not no, but yes and yes, because they have a lot of stuff out of the box, which provide a lot of value. Like for Power BI, they can identify a lot, like if somebody does unusual downloads or sharing of content. So this come out of the box. But what we learned
so
from
what does
security
that mean?
admins.
What does unusual sharing mean?
So if I usually share one report a month, and now in the last 20 minutes I shared 500 reports, or let's say 100 reports, hey, this might be suspicious action. So maybe somebody compromised my credentials and logged in to Power BI using my credentials, and now like sharing it with someone, like with an email address that they can use to send stuff outside of the system. Or it's like this is a bad actor scenario. Sometimes it's even maybe like not a bad actor doing something that isn't like that is risky. So I'm coming back to the security persona. So imagine like you are a security person or security team for organization of like 100,000 people. You have quite a lot of events. So if you cannot monitor one by one each and every user. So you want the system to help you identify unusual stuff, and you can filter them out manually later to see if it's something that connects. Because if I share a lot of reports in Power BI, maybe it's okay. But if I share a lot of reports in Power BI and share a lot of files in Office and do something strange in Exchange and etc., hey, maybe somebody got credential of this user and we need to investigation. And this end-to-end for security admins, it's priceless. Like I cannot describe how hard it to be security admin with like all of this digital richness that we have today. Security admins really have a challenge. So they don't want to block business, but on the other way, they're responsible not to compromise business. So
makes sense.
And I wanted to mention like Cloud App Security, and this is very important value. So we usually focus on out-of-the-box stuff, and they're very important when you start using the product. It gives you an idea of what you can do. And they have a lot of ML engines that they rely on, but they also enable you to customize stuff. And because like every organization is a bit different, so you have sort of like the baseline, which is out of the box, but you can customize stuff. You have your custom alerts, custom activities, custom queries.
All right, makes a ton of sense. Cool. So, and then maybe one topic which is not completely in your ballpark, but so what about Purview? So how does it help? How does Purview help us in some of these scenarios too?
Yeah. So Purview, it's a relatively new product. So I would differentiate between Purview today and Purview where it's going to be 6 months from now, 12 months from now, etc. So Purview, like if we talked so far, I mentioned the word Office a lot. And there is sort of like a big segment of our customers that use Office and Power BI together. There is another segment, which the two segments overlap, but that use Azure data as their infrastructure, and not Azure data, but like data systems, and Power BI, and not necessarily using Office. And the Office portal, so this is like these customers and the overlap, those that use Azure and Office. So these customers so far did not have much oversight and governance over the data estate, which comes in our food chain before Power BI, what we call the data sources, the servers. So Purview have a great like their data map features and their lineage features, so they enable organization to create a view of the entire data estate, including Power BI. And we have a great integration collaboration with them, so you can see a lot of information about Power BI. And this is once again, this coming back to the central persona, which is not the office security team, but somebody who's responsible for managing or governing databases and data systems. They can leverage Purview to get visibility over the data systems, how they're connected between each other, how the data flows, I have sensitive data in SQL, who consumes this in Power BI. All of this stuff they can get via Purview. And also Purview provides auto-classification and labeling of SQL data, which is huge. So you can use Purview to automatically classify, let's say, your SQL data. And there is a solution that enables you to propagate these labels to SQL, and then Power BI can inherit them. So you can get the auto classification on your, let's say, Power BI source data, and there is a way to inherit these labels into Power BI. So these are like two top scenarios. But I'm not an expert to Purview. Purview have a lot more coming in regarding classification. They're looking on not Azure cloud, but also like supporting different clouds. It's just really something that related to SAP. So Purview are sort of like in the blue ocean of where was Azure data catalog and governance for data systems and how connected. So they're like doing a lot of progress to make this area governed and manageable.
All right, cool. That makes sense. And that will bring me to my last question that I ask everyone. What is, and I think I know what your answer is going to be. What is the most exciting feature of Power BI that has been released in the last year?
Of Power BI or data protection Power BI? So this is a great question.
And you can say data protection, but in Power BI in general.
So I have one for data protection, and I have for Power BI in general. So I really love the content scan. I'm really excited about the content scan. So this is something new that is coming. It technically wasn't released yet, but it's really coming soon. And for me, it's like revolutionizing how we perceive data in Power BI, because so far it's sort of like we did not look into the data like on the overall view, and this is coming. And from the stuff that were released in the past year, so I really like Data Hub or Dataset Hub. I think like one of the challenges for enterprises, and so I interact a lot with enterprise customers, so this is why the context that I have. So I think like a lot of when you're in big enterprise, you have access to so much content, and it wasn't as easy to discover this content in Power BI so far. And I see that what we are doing with Dataset Hub is actually making it accessible and with really nice experience. So it's just like it's very simple to get data, to identify, to find data sets. And I'm like coming back to our beginning of our conversation as data freak. It was really like it was functionalities that was missing in Microsoft. We have a lot of data sets. It was really hard to find them. So I really like beside after the DLP policies on content scan, which I'm super excited about it and the potential that it has and what it will enable us moving forward. I think Dataset Hub is the second one.
All right, that makes sense. And that kind of concludes our talk. I mean, I've learned a lot about management information protection, data protection in general. Yeah, I really want to thank you for your time, and I'll see you next time.
Kasper, it was a pleasure. Let's do it again in a few months. I will be happy to tell you what are the new stuff that we are building.
That would be great. All right, thank you very much. And that concludes another episode of Kasper On BI. I hope you've learned a lot. I learned a lot. I love where these features are going and the possibilities that you have of Power BI to protect your data. And this is just one part of it, because we talked about protecting your data, but there's way more to it. Like there's authenticating your data. There's Intune. There's so many more things that you can layer on top of Power BI to protect your data and to protect your users. I actually did a session on what to tell your security team. I'll put it in the descriptions below. And with that, I want to thank you for your time. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you liked this episode, please hit the like button. If you want to see more, hit the subscribe button. And with that, I'll see you next time.